Hi everyone, welcome to Introduction to Fractions. Fractions is one of my favourite things to teach. I'm really disappointed that I'm not in class at the moment to help teach you all about fractions because I was really looking forward to it. I love teaching fractions because often whenever I say that in a classroom everyone goes, oh no, I hate fractions. And actually they're a really fun thing to learn about and really once you get the hang of it, it's really interesting and how many different ways you can use fractions and how important they are. Now, a fraction is a way of describing part of a whole. Now, that whole can be one object that's been divided up into different things, or it could be a group of objects. If you look at these counters, that is also divided up as well. So that's what we are going to be investigating today. So I'm going to start by giving you a demonstration and an introduction to some of the words that we'll be using when we're talking about fractions. This is just an introduction to fractions. I'm not going to be doing anything too complicated, just so that you really understand the basics of what a fraction is. So let's have a look at what I've got under this plate here. Ooh, a delicious whole bar of chocolate. Yum, my favourite. So here we have a whole. When we're talking about fractions, we're talking about how we break this up into its different equal parts. That word is important, that equal parts, because fractions, you know, they're tricky, but they like one rule, and the one rule is that everyone has to have the same size piece, so they are very, very fair. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the words, and you've got two numbers or two digits that make up a fraction. We've got a number that sits underneath this line and a number that sits on top of this line. Now the bottom number I've written in green to try and help you because the denominator is really like smashing things up. And I know somebody else who's green that likes smashing things up, and that is the Incredible Hulk. And he really likes smashing things up. So when you think of the denominator, the number, you've got to think of the Incredible Hulk, and he comes along and he smashes everything up into pieces. And now here, if you have a look at what the Incredible Hulk has done, he has broken the chocolate up into, let me have a look, check. He has broken it into 6 pieces. Therefore, the denominator is going to be 6. Thank you, Hulk. That was very handy. So, it's going to be back later for more breaking things. Okay, so when the denominator tells you how many pieces your your whole has been broken into, and in our case it is 6 pieces. So we know that we're looking at a denominator of 6, and now we need to know what the numerator is. And the numerator flies up above and comes in and is the one that chooses how many, so I've got Captain America for this, chooses how many pieces out of the 6 pieces are going to be picked together. Now he's not greedy, he's just going to take 1. And when he's taken 1 out of a possible 6. So our denominator is 6 and our numerator is 1. And we can write that in that way to understand what's been going on. And this, because it's got a 1 on it, as the numerator, is called a unit fraction. All unit fractions have 1 as a numerator. That means we've taken 1 piece out of all of that altogether. Now, this is just looking at 6, but I've got a sentence or a couple of sentences which you can use to help you remember how to write these fractions. So I'm going to put those in there. Might have to move Cat down a little bit with his piece of chocolate. Okay, so I want you to read this sentence with me. We're going to fill this in. When we're looking at the whole, a way of describing our fractions, the whole has been divided into 6 equal parts. Each part is 1/6 of the whole. So Cap here has 1/6, but if I took this piece, this is also 1/6 as well. And this is 1/6, and this is 1/6, and this is 1/6, and this is 1/6. Each part of this whole represents 1/6. Now if Cap had 2 pieces, then we would have to change that numerator, but he's only got 1 piece. Now it doesn't matter whether he took this piece or this piece, he still only has 1/6 of the whole. And then we can use this sentence. So let's repeat this sentence. The whole is divided into 6 equal parts. Each part is 1/6 of the whole. So I'd like to thank Cap for that. I'm going to put that back. And off he goes. He's going to try and investigate some more things. Right, so that works when we've got 6 pieces, but how does it work when we're looking at something else? I'm going to show you something a bit different now. So let's say we've got our bar of chocolate there. Okay, we've got our bar of chocolate, and we're going to get rid of these for a minute. And we're just going to clean off those because we're starting again. Because this is where fractions can get a little bit trickier. So we've got our whole again. Oh, look, here comes our denominator back again. Here he comes to do some smashing. Hulk is going to smash them all, so Hulk smash. Okay, he's done some excellent smashing as a denominator. It's a very important role. Just make sure he's done that correctly. Fantastic, off he goes. So now, let's see if we can fill in our sentence again, which will help us write our fraction over here. So the whole has been divided into 4 equal parts. Each part is 1/4 of a whole. Now, some people might know that 1/4 is quite a special fraction because it actually has another name. And let's see if you can recognise what that other name will be if we draw it now. Again, let's write the denominator here. Again, it's 4 equal parts. We've got there. And here comes Cap again, just to come and go and get his piece. As the numerator, he's just going to take 1. If you have a little look. So we've got 4 pieces altogether. How many has he got? He's got 1 piece. See if I can find my post-its. 1 piece, and he's got 1/4. Does anybody know the other name that we have for that fraction? Because 1/4 isn't wrong, but we can also call 1/4 1/4. And this might be why some people find fractions quite tricky, because when we're talking about unit fractions and when we're talking about that idea of different fractions, the first 4 fractions that we look at are quite tricky. So I'm going to just move this to one side, and I'm going to leave Cap to go and enjoy his chocolate over here. Hopefully he'll save me some for later. Okay, so here we have some of the ways of writing those different fractions. In fact, let's do this. Okay, we've talked about 1/2 already, and that was quite good. So let's have a look at the different fractions. So 1/2 is the whole thing all together. We've got our 1/2 all together. And then we have, when it's broken, when the denominator is broken into 2 pieces, and we've got 2 as a denominator, we don't call it tooths, but actually they're called 1/2. Each of these is called 1/2. Okay? And then when it's broken into 3 pieces, it's not 1/3, it is 1/3. Each part is 1/3. And finally, when we get into quarters, when we get 4th, again, 4ths does kind of work. I would give you a mark if you wrote 4ths on a test, but here we call them quarters. Okay, after you've done these first few fractions, the pattern is a bit easier. So 1/5, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. But those first few ones, a whole, half, third, and quarter, are quite tricky words that you will need to remember when you're describing those different fractions. Okay, all of these, if you had one part of them, would be a unit fraction, one part of the whole. Each of these, so in this case, that's a quarter, that's a quarter, that's a quarter, and that's a quarter. Each of these is one of those. Each of these is a third. Each of these is a half, and obviously one whole is just one. So those are the only ones that are a little bit trickier if we're trying to describe them, but all the rest should be fine. Now, I better go because I've got to make sure that Cap isn't eating all my chocolate, but I'll be back to talk about more fractions a bit later on. All right, bye.